Hello and welcome to Brilliance Today, where individuals let their brilliance shine through their stories, expertise and philosophy, because they're on a mission to make a difference and leave a legacy. Introducing Brenda Dempsey, publisher, speaker and TV presenter. Get ready to be inspired.
Hello and welcome to Brilliance Today. This is the place where brilliance shines everywhere. And we're on our second series, which is called Voices of Women. And I'm delighted in this series, you're going to hear from some remarkable women from across the world who are stepping in and forging ahead with their leadership hat on. It's a lead hership. She's leading her life and leading others. And it's so important that we hear those stories, we share those stories to inspire, influence, and impact us into action. So that's as much as I want to say, but I want to introduce you to our guest today, who is Judith Ratcliffe. Hi, Judith.
Hi, Brenda. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a real pleasure and an honour to be here. I'm just so pleased.
Oh, wonderful. And you can see already, and you can hear in our voices, there is brilliance everywhere around with Judith's sunny disposition, her positivity, and we're going to bring that out. But first of all, you might be asking, who is Judith Ratcliffe? So Judith, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Oh gosh, the impossible question, as I like to call it. Who am I? I am a privacy professional. I'm a data protection officer. Those of you on LinkedIn will know me for some of the things that I post about that. I write a blog, I have a newsletter, I've done a few videos over the past few years, including with PrivSec Global, on panel discussions with the European Information Security Summit, with Cyber Valor, and a few others as well, including the Office of the Data Protection Authority of Guernsey, who were very, very lovely and very kind to me very recently. So thank you for that. And also Project Bijou. It's the jewel in the crown of data protection, I think. And yeah, they're great. They're there. So also, I have been a hospital radio presenter. I did that for 7 years. I was a Rainbow Guide leader for 8 years, well, young leader and then leader for 8 years, spanning both of those roles. And also I write books, as you know, Brenda, I write storybooks. I write storybooks for children, and I also write privacy and data protection books as well. The series for privacy and data protection started with this year's book, and it's going to continue.
So certainly what I would call an accomplished woman, but you're getting started. You know, it's a journey. It's a journey, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of the stories, because I know what your chapter is in the book Voices of Women, and we're kind of taking those stories a little bit further. And so I know you're going to be great in the hot seat today. But what I want to know, and what I want you to inspire and share with the audience, is what does being a female leader, now you might have your opinion on that, and that's fine, we want to hear it because it's all about truth here. How does it feel and look like to you?
That's a really good question. I suppose I don't always think of it as being a female leader as much as it just being a leader, and I happen to be female. So I suppose I'd start from there. I can also, you wanted some stories, I have a few, and I can share some from back in the day when there are 3 key points, I think, to leadership, female or otherwise. And for me, it's courage. So things like not only challenging the status quo in my field, but also challenging innovators and scientists who can sometimes be hailed as deity-like or incapable of wrongdoing. People often say science is the new religion. There has to be somebody to challenge the science, because sometimes people get it wrong, or people don't necessarily get the science wrong, but they rely on statistics and statistics can, as in a wonderful clip from Yes Minister that I like to show people about the perfect balance sample. Thank you so much, BBC, for creating that series. The perfect balance sample is a classic example of how you can fudge responses when you use statistics and surveys to show one thing one way, or one thing, or the complete opposite, in fact. So it's also courage to do things differently and to stand up for doing things differently and to advocate for doing things differently. And I might bring that in a little bit later in the conversation if it's appropriate, we'll see. But I've always been a little bit different. I was different from when I was in junior school, and I looked a lot like the worst witch. I had 2 long plaits in my hair, and I wore those all the way up through junior school into the first few years of high school as well. And because that almost became a trademark symbol for me, I actually wore that when I was called to the bar. I wore my hair in my 2 long dark plaits. So there we go. Courage to stand up for what is right and to refuse to allow yourself to be flattered and coaxed, which people can do. They don't always try the bullying, threatening tactic, which is the other thing you've got to be prepared to stand your ground against. They do sometimes flatter you and coax you, and you come off a call thinking, did I really agree to that? And then I have actually done that. I've come off a call and gone, oh, whoops, gone back to it and gone, okay, guys, I know we said this on the call, but actually, having thought about it further, I now have to go back and say, the law says this is my position. I'm really sorry, but I learned very early on, to make sure that not to agree to things and to always have a backup position of, if necessary, I will clarify in an email afterwards because I have to.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I think that's a really great point. And I know that as a leader myself, also as a woman in business, and particularly you, I know the tides turn, but people see privacy and GDPR is a kind of a predominantly male role, although I know we've had a discussion and you saying that it's changing, which is great to hear. Of course it is, and with advocates like yourself. But I think it's a great thing to not be coerced in a positive way into saying yes to something that when you get off the call, you go, exactly, did I just agree that? That's not right, that's wrong, I can't do that. So where do you find the courage to go back and say, look, on that call we said this is how I felt. I felt in a corner, but actually I've gone and reflected and come back and this is actually what needs to happen, or whatever, and I think it's a good strategy to build that into how you conduct yourself, so that you've got that get out of jail free card, so that you can come back and say, I will reflect on what's happened in this meeting today, and I might come back with a slightly different answer, just to let you know. I think if you say that at the top of the meeting, then people might think twice about trying to coerce you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's also about saying things like, look, I need more time to reflect on this. It's about I used to then compile a set of stock phrases that you can use in meetings, like, let me come back to you on that. This is my position now. As you say, let me think some more. Let me look at all the facts first. Let me check. All of these are cute little phrases that you can just throw in, and they will be enormously helpful to you.
I couldn't agree more, and I've learned that lesson a lot this week, actually. You think you're getting tougher, and this is how I love everything's a journey, so on that's kind of leading in nicely to the next question that I've got. So we're on this journey. It's not about the destination, it's about enjoying the process. I believe in that, and I believe you do too. But being that kind of person, there's values and habits and traits that you've got. So how are you using those values, those traits, to shape you as a woman in business?
So using the values and traits to shape me as a woman in business. So it's things like critical thinking. So another thing that I pride myself on is, and I sort of alluded to it a little bit, I think, at the beginning of our conversation, it's looking beyond what you're presented with. So I open the worm cans and I dig deeply. It's about forensically examining cases and really sort of getting to know the technology and how it works, but also calling out things like misleading advertising, unlawful requests for costs that aren't owed, and bad faith and bad actions towards innocent customers and patients and staff. And the customers can be the individuals, but there's also occasionally a certain amount of bad faith that goes on between companies. So you're also bearing in mind standing up for your organization as well, in terms of sometimes, so an example of how I've used this to my advantage in the business scenario and to the advantage of the company I worked for. I had a company that worked for a client, and the company that I worked for also had another company that was working, I'll call it a processor. So we've got processor, my company, client, if that helps in the hierarchy. And the client is, of course, at the top of the tree, telling us what it wants. And the client is looking to us as the trusted advisors on data protection, things like that. And the client comes to us with what it considers to be a very simple question, which is, can we get away with not destroying this particular set of data? To which our response is, well, we need to know why you don't want to destroy it. And the answer, of course, is, well, the processor, the one at the bottom of the tree, is telling us that it wants to charge us more for destroying this data. And we don't want those costs. Therefore, we don't want to destroy the data. Can we get away with not doing it? And so, of course, I sat there and thought, well, hang on. First of all, you've got the legal duty to comply with data protection law, and that's for the client, for us as the middle organization, and also for the processor at the bottom. So shouldn't the processor be agreeing to destroy this data in any event? Because the law says you must.
Yeah.
Also, haven't we got a contract in place, that's us as the person in the middle, that says when you work for us and on our behalf working for the client or other clients, you will do certain things, and that includes you will destroy data when they ask for it. So haven't we already got something whereby our client is already or has already paid for this to be done, because they are paying for a compliance service? They are not paying for non-compliance here, because that would get them into lots of trouble. So I went back and I asked the commercial team if I could see the contract, or the memorandum of understanding as it was then. And so I looked at that. I looked at Crown Commercial Guidance, which applied because of the particular client and the particular organisations in question. I looked at the law just to make sure that I hadn't made a mistake. And then my advice was as follows. No, you still have to destroy the data, but I also agree with you, no, you shouldn't be having to pay for this. And therefore, what actually we are going to do on the other hand is we are going to poke the processor and say, look, you shouldn't be charging them, and we think you've also overcharged them previously for compliance costs that you probably shouldn't have charged them, because according to the law you should be doing it anyway, and also according to the contract they are not paying you for a non-compliant service, they're paying you to comply with the law while delivering the services. So on that basis we are going to, if assuming that I've got my facts straight, we are going to ask them to pay you back anything that you have overpaid. And no, we don't think you should be paying for this, and we're not going to let them charge you.
Well, thank goodness for people like yourself, you know, and that is really value driven. And what screams for me is about integrity, you know, and when you're working with the law, honesty. One might expect that honesty is at the core of all legalities, but as you've just explained very clearly, it's not always the case. So it's about due diligence, about knowing things yourself and not just relying on somebody because they said it, then it must be true. So hats off. So straight away, you know, we've only got onto one trait so far, which is what I hear is integrity. So would you say that that is a big driver in other things then? What other two traits would you not be without?
Oh yes,
It's a business woman.
everything falls out of my personal integrity. I wouldn't be without it, and I couldn't do the job I do without it either. And actually, I couldn't have done hospital radio without it either, because the relationships with our listeners down on the wards, the relationships with every person that I went out and interviewed for the radio station, whether live in the field or in the studio, and even the people whose press conferences I got invited to, and some of those were big name stars, as were then, and some of them went on to be even bigger stars later on. I couldn't have done any of those things if those people hadn't trusted me.
Yeah.
And if their agents hadn't very kindly trusted me. And because I was making all of those connections myself, although I was able to say, well, it's for a hospital radio station, which probably helped, but I was making those connections as just me, as somebody who they had never met before.
So authenticity goes with integrity, and doing what you say. So for sure, as I'm getting to know you more and more, Judith, it just screams from every pore of your body. So look, we influence people, but people also influence us. Who's been one of the greatest influencers in your life?
Oh, there are so many, too many to mention, but one of them who has been really quite important, who I only found out a lot of her story very, very recently, and she's called Maya Angelou.
Yes.
Yeah, I know you've heard of her. I'm hoping that a lot of your listeners will have heard of her, but if you haven't, there is a very good interview. It's on the BBC iPlayer. It's from a series called Face to Face. And she's interviewed, and it's only about a 38-minute interview, but within that she shares a lot of her pearls of wisdom. And one thing that really chimed with me, it was really funny, how I talk about privacy and data protection, and one of the things she said was, you can blind people with data, but the hard evidence is lost. And I thought, yes. Perfect. Yes. That's absolutely. I say that to people all the time. You can't just rely on the data. The data can be so misleading. And I thought it was really interesting that she picks up on that as well. Also, the way she said, red to me may mean something utterly different to you, and it's all about perspectives. And again, bringing it back to my world, a lot of the stuff where I'm talking to people about AI, artificial intelligence, algorithms, well, they may say you're one thing, but actually they only know a narrow view or half of the story, or even only a tiny bit of the story. And they've labeled you as a witch or a tyrant or a dictator or a sweet little innocent thing that would never hurt a fly, or whatever it happens to be. And the one other wonderful thing about Maya Angelou is she never gave up. She persevered. She faced a heck of a lot of racism, particularly when, for example, she gives the example that she went to try to be a bus conductor.
Yeah.
And it took her a whole month of being persistent and going every single day and waiting there until they would let her be that. But one other really important thing that I'm not sure how many of you will know, I'm sure those of you that know her story well will know it, but the reason why she wrote "Gather Together in My Name" about a particular period in her life, you know it, Brenda, you know it well, and it was, this is what I took away from what she was saying in the interview. Read it yourself and draw your own conclusions. Read it yourself, listen to it yourself, listen to it, watch it yourself.
We know what you mean.
Or read the transcript yourself, depending on how you do things, and draw your own conclusions. There we go. Helps if you get the language right. I always say that to people, get the language right. Whoops. Shot myself in the foot nicely, didn't I?
I love that, multisensory. Yeah.
Never mind. One for the what was it called? One for the blooper reel. There we go. There's always a blooper when I do radio somewhere along the line. So one for the blooper reel. There we go. You can tell it's live.
Yeah.
So why she wrote "Gather Together in My Name," so that children wouldn't be afraid of making mistakes. And I thought that was such a lovely thing to do, so that because, and she said, and I can certainly identify this myself, children feel like their parents are perfect. and can do no wrong, or have done no wrong, or
That's it,
have never made the heinous mistakes,
yeah.
like,
Yeah, I know.
you know, like the one the one I've done, and the one I've given an example of previously in conversations with your team, Brenda, and with yourself, about ejecting a CD on air. I've done it, and I've also helped other people through it when they've done it. You know, but it's the fact that children can be paralytically afraid of putting a foot wrong.
Yeah, and I know that as a
yeah.
teacher, you know, they quickly can develop an I can't mindset. But of course, as you know me, we turn those I can'ts into I can. You know, and me, Angela, and Still I Rise, you know, it's a famous, famous poem. And women, when I go to women empowerment events, it is 9 times out of 10 the poem that is read or quoted, or, you know, because of its power and its impact. Which brings me on to the next question. What experience, event, person, whatever it may be, has had the greatest impact on your life?
Oh gosh, so many.
I know.
But again, I will choose a very lovely one from my time in hospital radio. And this was a big star that I went to see at a press conference. It was the first ever, bear in mind, press conference that I had ever done, and for this hospital radio station. So I tend to come across as a naturally confident person, and indeed I don't lack it very often. There are things that do make me nervous, but in terms of actually going and doing the thing, that doesn't tend to be one of them. But I was there, and I thought, well, I've got to go and sit near the front, because I can't very well get away with, size-wise, sitting at the back and being seen and or heard, and or having somebody actually see that I have raised my hand to speak. And it wasn't my intention at all, but somehow I ended up sitting directly in front of the big name star at the time. And my question was maybe the second or third question, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, that they chose to answer. And my question, which I said in my naturally nice big loud voice, was, can you please say something for the patients and staff at Warwick Hospital? And the big star sat there and thought about it for a minute and sort of did I've never been asked this question before. And I sat there with my heart in my mouth thinking, oh, so I've just asked the impossible question. Are security about to come and throw me out? Or I was terrified. But they sat there, they thought about it for about 5 minutes, and then they came out with a really, really lovely saying. And it was along the lines of, although I'm probably misquoting because I don't have it directly in front of me, but it was, I wish you well, get better. And if you know it's something that's not going to get better, just keep fighting strong and keep a positive outlook on life. It was along those lines.
Yeah.
And it was really lovely, and I was so touched by it, and they instantly became one of my heroes and have been ever since. And I was really rooting for them when they went on Dancing on Ice. They didn't get very far in it, but they did then become a judge on it, so I was like, yes.
Well, you see, that's the thing, and I think sometimes you can throw people with, you know, we ask questions, you do things, you've asked questions, I'm podcasting here, and I'm asking questions because I love questions, you know. I like to get into the nitty-gritty. But sometimes you do ask a question and people think, oh, I don't really know what to say. And then, but real people, and we've talked about this already, will come back and be honest and say something from their heart, because when you speak from your heart, that's when you're going to connect more with people. And that's why we struggle, maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but we can struggle with many a politician, because people feel they're saying what we want to hear rather than saying something that they believe in and that they're passionate about, and why they went into politics to make a difference in the first place. But you never hear them speaking like that. So whether you're a celebrity, a politician, a sports personality, or whatever in life, when you can speak from the inside out, you hear me talking about that a lot, from, you know, from a place of heart and connection, then whatever you say, those words will make impact on people. They will be heard and they will be remembered, because as Maya Angelou says, how did it make you feel? You know,
Yeah.
when we can make people feel better, then you're going to be remembered.
Definitely. And it was just so kind and generous as well. And I certainly will never forget it. And I played it as often as I could to my listeners, and I'm sure they got a lot out of it as well.
Oh, that's lovely.
And yeah, it was a lovely thing to do. And I mean, the thing is that, to be honest with you, he could quite simply have just turned around and gone, next.
Oh yeah.
You know, next question. You know, don't know this girl, never seen her before. Ask me a random question.
But it was
So,
compassionate. Compassionate.
Yeah.
It definitely can be seen that. And one of the things that we've alluded to, and again, it's moving into the next question. You think we planned this, and we haven't. Listeners, we've not planned this. Audience, no planning whatsoever, because I don't believe in planning. And you spoke out. You were a newbie, but you found courage to use your voice. So what is the driver within you that fuels that courage to speak up in your voice that's fueled with that integrity? Where does that come from?
And that's another really good question. And that's one that I might actually have to sit and think about for a minute.
That's okay.
Because I suppose it comes from all sorts of places. There have been lots of cases in the news and also in the law that I've learned about, like, for example, I gave the example of Essen Marper v the United Kingdom in the European Court of Human Rights. There was another one, Peck v the United Kingdom in the European Court of Human Rights, another particularly sad case, and I won't go into all of the details, but be aware this may cause a little upset or slight amount of distress if you are particularly affected by such issues. So I'll throw that out as a warning now.
A trigger warning.
Yeah, trigger warning. Yes, trigger warning.
Thank you for that.
Peck v United Kingdom is about a person who, and I won't go into the details, but they tried to very badly self-harm in a public place. This was captured on closed circuit television, CCTV, and the police got involved. And fortunately, an intervention occurred, and I think they were all right afterwards from that perspective. Unfortunately, the council that had hold of the closed circuit television then publicised what had happened to a degree and used clips of the video because they had a big crime prevention push going on. And my understanding of the case is that they wanted to show how well their CCTV system was working and things like that. But unfortunately, there were several headlines that ran because this was then, it got into the wider press. My understanding is it also got onto the BBC's Crime Watch. And this unfortunate person who had basically needed assistance, from the way I've read the case, appears to have been made to look like they were a criminal. Not only through some of the headlines that ran, which included phrases like "gotcha" and things like "bad situation diffused," I think was part of the, I've not got it in front of me, but that it was talking about diffusing situations, it was talking about the police getting involved, and also, you know, having your face shown on Crime Watch, whether or not, and I believe that although they weren't necessarily intending to show faces on particular areas, faces were shown, all sorts of things went horribly, horribly wrong. Whereas from my perspective, from a privacy professional's perspective, certainly, I sat there and looked at that and went, well, actually, why on earth did you even share this with the media anyway? Arguably, you didn't need to. This was not somebody who was committing a crime in any way, shape or form. So why did you even feel the need to do that? And I would argue it was disproportionate as well. But that's, you know, that's just my perspective. But I've from when I was very, very young, I've had a sense of when things are unjust, and I haven't liked it, and I've always done my best to put things right. and make sure that
yeah,
those things don't happen
speak up.
again.
Maybe it's a word I don't like to use, but I think people understand it. So from that perspective, I'm using it. You know, sometimes we need to be a voice for the voiceless, for those who have yet to find their courage, for those who are maybe being persecuted, or those who are being wrongly like put in a situation like this poor young girl, with everything to do with mental health today. You know, the question is, I don't know the case, I can't remember, but how long ago was this, Judith? Can you remember?
So it was a gentleman that it happened
Gentleman,
to.
sorry.
Not a young lady.
Sorry,
Although
did I say a lady?
No, you're quite all right. Let me have a look in my little book here and see if I can find because I believe I actually wrote it down.
3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
It's a few years ago now, but it was in the 2000s, I think. Let me just double check. I've written it down here somewhere. If I can't find it quickly, then we'll move on. But
the point is, we've come so far now with GDPR and privacy,
yeah.
And all of these great things in the field that you work in to protect people. But still, you know, there are people out there, you know, sometimes with media, it's sensationalism. They're looking for that, you know, that sharp intake of breath. And if they know it's going to get attention, they'll do it because they're not being driven by integrity.
Yeah.
You know, they're thinking about their career, the numbers, the you know, all of that, rather than a victim, for example, or someone who's just been caught up and misrepresented.
Yeah. Well, I have to admit, I don't think the council was doing this with any malicious intent. I just think that, as with a lot of things in privacy, they didn't consider how badly hurt somebody might be before they did it. And I mean, the other problem that you have, and I found the page now. So when the council issued some of the photographs with an article entitled "Diffused," for example, that was October 1995, but the case only got to the European Court of Human Rights in 2003.
Yeah. So, you know, thank God you'll be able to say how much we've moved forward from those days. But, you know, it's like everything else, there's always work to do. It's a journey, as we said way back at the beginning. Okay, so that was really quick. Let's lift the mood here. And something, because I know you love to laugh, you've got great stories. So I want to end on, well, it's the penultimate question. Tell us a funny story that, no matter what, makes you smile, makes your heart sing, brings joy to you. What story just tickles you so much that you love to share it?
So again, one from my hospital radio days, and this one's quite funny, and I aired it as was on the tape as well. I was interviewing somebody in the middle of a park in Leamington Spa, and there are, if you know the Victoria Park area in Leamington Spa and the Pump Room Gardens, and by the bandstand in the Pump Room Gardens just outside the library, there are these incredibly tall, I think they're pine trees, but feel free to correct me on that, any people who know trees considerably better than I do. They're incredibly tall. They're the ones that look like Christmas trees with the big long branches and things, and they often have pigeons nesting in them. So there's your little bit of background. Keep that in mind as the story continues. I was sitting underneath one of these trees interviewing my guest at the time, and it was a beautiful sunny day. The interview was going really well. They were a local musician, and halfway through maybe the interview, although it may not have been halfway through, I may be mistaking the timings, a twig was knocked out of the tree by this pigeon, and it fell on my interviewee's head.
Oops.
And we had a bit of a laugh about it at the time, and carried on. But of course, for the entirety of the rest of that interview, I couldn't help myself. I was looking over his head to see if it would happen again, and he called me on it, and I aired the interview entirely as was, including with him calling me on it, because it was just hilarious.
Yeah, unedited. It's one of those things, you know, it just comes out of the blue and you think, oh, is it going to happen again? Or worse, are we going to get a poop?
I just couldn't help myself. It was comedy gold.
Oh yeah, I know, it's amazing. So I always like to end on light-hearted and positivity, and so therefore this is all about women, voices of women from many different backgrounds. So Judith, as a voice of women, what 3 tips would you give to young women today who've got aspirations and a vision of becoming a leader one day themselves?
Now that one I sort of have prepared for, haven't I? Because they're sort of in my chapter as well. So the first one, and the one that has hopefully come across a lot during what I've been saying, particularly in terms of not being afraid to sit at the front and talk to big stars, and not being afraid to, you know, stand up and say, well, actually, guys, we probably need to pay the client back, and other things. Treat everyone as your equal. So I said that a bit quickly, so I'll say it again. Treat everyone as your equal. And that way you will always have the confidence to speak the truth to those in positions of power. You will find that doors open to you, and you will be able to listen better and collaborate with amazing people from all walks of life.
Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful. I do love that. And I suppose moving on from that, it's like treat others as you would like to be treated yourself, you know? So, and I do like that and I learned that a few years ago when I went to the House of Parliament myself one day. This was when I was still teaching, and I got to speak to a past MP, and I asked him a question about education and how we'd gone from being in the top 10 in the world in education to being at that time it was 19. And you know, and he was really, I felt his response was very honest. And you know, a lot of folk would think, well, how could you ask somebody like him that question? Because we're all human. So I take on board what you say. Treat everybody, we're all equal, we're all human. You know, some people are just doing different jobs, you know, and every job is important, whether you're sweeping the streets or whether you're running a country. Everybody has a place to play in that society. So from that point of view, as a human, we're all equal. So thanks for that. So what other tip do you have?
So I have 2 more, but I would go on the back of that as well, and also do a treat them as they would like to be treated themselves, not necessarily as you would like to be treated, is also part of that.
Yeah.
So for example, again, in my world, don't decide that everybody wants to be online and do it digitally just because you do. Some people want and need to be offline, particularly from a fraud prevention and financial crime prevention perspective. You're awfully exposed if you put everything online. But the second point is, and this is something that a very wise person once shared with me, and I'm very, very grateful to that person, so I'll share it with you as well. Get into the habit of asking when something is going to happen, because it's far more effective than asking why something hasn't happened yet, or if it is going to happen in the future. It's one that I still have to remind myself of today. I do sometimes go back to if or why, but whenever I can, use when.
Yeah, that's very deciding. It's easy. It's a narrative question, so you know it's one of those questions, and I think if we can keep that in the forefront, it takes responsibility to say, well, when will it happen, and that person then has to then commit to that, and that's what we need in order to move forward, because we need that action. Yes. And lastly, and you'll love this one, Brenda. Be the person in the room who unashamedly asks the awkward question or questions. Typical me. Absolutely. I don't think I've asked any awkward questions today. No. I think there's certainly some situations give rise to that, you know, when people are just trying to, you know, oh God, I can't get my word out. And people are just trying to maybe try and fool you, or they're trying to big themselves up more. But if you ask those simple questions, then, it makes someone maybe squirm a little, and you're not doing it for that purpose. You're doing it because it's the integrity of finding out the truth. The truth has always got to come out. But here's the caveat, Judith, for me. Truth is about being enshrouded with love. Truth isn't about beating someone else down or making them look bad, but truth is about coming from a place of respect and love and all of those wonderful things to get to what it is that is got the human element to it. Because as I said earlier, we're all human. Anything else you want to say on the back of that, Judith?
So first of all, I'd agree with you. It has to be done respectfully. You have to be polite. Yep. So you'll see me doing this, and you'll see other people do this to me. And at privacy and data protection conferences, people ask pointy questions, but they ask them politely and they ask them respectfully. And I always make the joke of, well, this is the time to get your own back, guys, because I do it to you, so you can do it to me now. But the point about awkward questions is that other people are usually thinking along the same lines, but they may not be brave enough to speak. And exactly. By awkward questions, I'm not talking about being rude to somebody. I'm talking about asking them, so about misleading advertising, something that I would love to ask the people who have written those reports, and the questions that I bring out in my, I was going to say essays about it, but articles, newsletter articles about it, are things like, where exactly are you protecting privacy in this? Because because from what I've read, according to what I understand privacy to be, and my understanding is that it's this, and this, you aren't protecting privacy. Can you show me or tell me where this product protects privacy and where this product does these things? Because for whatever reason, I haven't found it. And it may be that they actually come back with something and go, oh, actually, yeah, it's here, and here. So they can also actually use your awkward question to their advantage if they've got something positive to say as well. But if there are holes in what they've got to say, they will also show up. But also be the person in the room who sits back and lets others speak first. That's also quite a key part to figuring things out. And in that way, you don't have to necessarily ask so many awkward questions, or you can be thinking up your awkward questions while other people are speaking. So you can make notes about what they say, you can reflect on what they have said in your own response, and it can actually give you a greater persuasive influence.
I like that. But anyway, we've come to the end. How quickly has that gone by? Time.
I know.
We've slightly overran, but it was so good. And I want to just say this. Brilliance is a masterpiece of the mind. And I don't know about you, listeners and audience today, but I think we've seen some of the masterpiece of the wonderful and the beautiful Judith Ratcliffe. Judith, thank you very much for being a voice of women. Thank you very much for this chat today. I don't want to say discussion, but it's more of a conversation. And I wish you well, and keep spreading those ripples of brilliance in everything that you think, do, and say. So everybody, thank you very much from me, Brenda Dempsey, CEO of Book Brilliance Publishing and host of Brilliance Today. And thank you, as I said, to the wonderful Judith Ratcliffe. So until the next time, this is Brenda saying, be brilliant, much love, and to the pip.
That's it for this episode of Brilliance Today. Thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. For more information or to contact Book Brilliance Publishing, visit bookbrilliancepublishing.com. And remember, do different, be brilliant.